Good day, everyone. I am Alwyn Smith, an environmental studies year 4 student at the Knox Community College. Today, I'll be doing a critical analysis presentation on the Voices of the Caribbean based on the 2025 United Nations General Assembly speeches by the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Andrew Holness, and the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Motley. It is a privilege to share this comparative analysis with you today. We're going to explore two powerful speeches delivered at the 80th United Nations General Assembly by Prime Minister Andrew Holness of Jamaica and Prime Minister Mia Motley of Barbados. These speeches are more than diplomatic formalities. They are strategic interventions crafted by Caribbean leaders who are not just reacting to global challenges, but actively shaping the discourse around climate justice, governance, and technology. In this presentation, I'll walk you through 5 key areas: the core themes of each speech, 1, 2, their rhetorical strategies, 3, how they balance national and regional priorities, 4, their relevance to global governance, and 5, my own reflections on their impacts. So let's begin with the Prime Minister of Jamaica. Prime Minister Andrew Holness approached the United Nations stage with a tone of pragmatic urgency. His speech centered on 4 major themes. First, climate resilience and adaptation financing. Holness made it clear that for Jamaica, climate change is not theoretical, it's existential. He called for financing mechanisms that are predictable, accessible, and tailored to the realities of small island developing states. Secondly, debt sustainability. He challenged the outdated metrics used to assess development eligibility, arguing that GDP per capita doesn't reflect vulnerability. Holness advocated for debt for climate swaps and reforms to the global financing architecture. Third, multilateral reforms. He emphasized the need for inclusive global governance, stating that no nation is too small to be heard. This was a call to democratize decision-making at the institutional levels like the United Nations and the IMF. Finally, Holness reaffirmed Jamaica's commitment to representing the interests of small island developing nations, especially in climate negotiations and development finance. His speech was structured, policy-driven, and grounded in institutional logic. Now onto the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Motley. Her speech was strictly different in tone, more emotive, philosophical, and morally charged. She began by addressing the crisis of truth. In her words, she said, "When we lose shared trust, our global society loses its center of gravity." She warned that misinformation and geopolitical spin are eroding the foundations of global cooperation. Next, she spoke on climate justice. Unlike Holness's focus on adaptation, Motley emphasized accountability. She reframed climate finance as a matter of historical responsibility, not charity, and called for legal binding frameworks to address methane emission and loss and damage. She also addressed peace advocacy, condemning the violence in Gaza and Sudan. Quoting Tacitus, she said, "They make a desert and call it peace." This was a powerful indictment of global silence in the face of humanitarian crises. Finally, she tackled AI regulation and digital equity. Motley warned that unregulated artificial intelligence could deepen inequality and erase historical truths. She called for global frameworks to ensure ethical use and inclusive access. Her speech was a moral appeal, less about policy mechanics, more about conscience. Let's now look at how Prime Minister Holness delivered his message. His tone was diplomatic and pragmatic, designed to build consensus. His style was structured and policy oriented, reflecting Jamaica's technocratic approach to global reform. In his presentation, Prime Minister Holness used evidence-based persuasion, aligning Jamaica's needs with global frameworks. Emotional appeal was also used, especially when discussing small islands, developing states' vulnerability. Repetition was also a strategy used to reinforce key reform proposals like climate finance and debt relief. Holness spoke like a negotiator, clear, calm, and strategic. As for the rhetorical strategies of the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, on the other hand, unlike Prime Minister Holness, spoke like a philosopher and a storyteller. Her tone was emotive and urgent, and her style was narrative driven. She used, in her speech, historical analogies like Tacitus and Bob Marley to evoke moral reflection. She also used rhetorical questions, challenging the audience to confront uncomfortable truth. Emotional storytelling was also used, especially her closing image of the Palestinian girl carrying her sister through rubbles. Her speech wasn't just informative, it was transformative. It asked the world not just to act, but to feel and to put feelings and compassion at the foundation of its actions. Now, let's compare their priorities side by side. On the theme of climate change, Jamaica's Prime Minister was about adaptation and resilience, while Barbados was on justice and urgency. The theme of governance, Jamaica was more multilateral reform, while Barbados was ethical leadership. On the theme of technology, digital inclusion was for Jamaica, while Barbados was on AI regulation and historical equity. In terms of tone, Jamaica's Prime Minister was diplomatic and pragmatic, while Barbados' Prime Minister was emotive and philosophical. Both leaders advocated for equity and uplifting small islands developing states. However, Holness focused on structural reforms, while Motley emphasized moral consciousness. Together, they offered a dual lens that strengthens the Caribbean global voice, one technical and the other ethical. On the subject of relevance to Caribbean and global governance, regionally, these speeches reflected shared concern: climate vulnerability, debt burdens, marginalization in global systems, but they also showed leadership. Holness positions Jamaica as a reformist actor, focused on financial justice and institutional equity. Motley positions Barbados as a moral compass, challenging global ethics and advocating for peace and digital fairness. Globally, they reminded us that Caribbean nations are not passive. They are active architects of a more just world order. What resonated most with me was Motley's framing of the crisis of truth. In an age of misinformation, her warning that law becomes theater, news becomes spectacle, and science becomes just another opinion is chillingly relevant. Yet, I also admired Prime Minister Holness's clarity and precision, especially his call for equality among equals and proportionality among equals. It's a powerful reminder that justice must be both moral and measurable. Together, these leaders show that Caribbean diplomacy is not just reactive, It's visionary. I must therefore acknowledge that Caribbean leaders are no longer whispering from the margin. They are speaking with clarity, conviction, and consequence. Their speeches reflected urgent national concerns and a bold regional vision for justice, sustainability, and reform. As the world faces climate collapse, digital disruption, and geopolitical fragmentation, the Caribbean's voice is not just relevant, it's indispensable. I thank you.